Senator Patterson.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Today, the inflation rate jumped to 3.2%. Does the government admit that having spending growth running at 4 times the rate of the economy, debt set to reach $1.2 trillion is fuelling inflation and hurting all Australians?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Patterson for the question. I'm glad to get a question on the economy. We haven't had one for a while from the opposition, so I am very pleased to get one. And I would say it's interesting to get a question from the party that went to the last election going to increase the taxes on every single 14 million employees, workers in this country, who went to the election with bigger deficits, higher taxes and bigger debt because they were going to borrow billions of dollars to raise electricity prices through the delivery of nuclear power stations. And I also note the inflation challenge that we inherited from those opposite. Well, I know you don't like the facts when it comes to the economic record, but when we came to government, inflation was running at 6.1%. It peaked in the December quarter of that year. It peaked in the December quarter of that year. Inflation running at 6.1%. We had massive deficits for the foreseeable future. What we have done is repaired the budget, got rid of the waste, returned the upside from the revenue that we've received to budget repair, and significantly lowered inflation, working hand in hand with the Reserve Bank to ensure that we did get inflation back into band. Now, we have seen inflation tick up in the results that we've seen for the September quarter, but when we look at, and I know those opposite were obsessed with trimmed mean inflation, underlying inflation has now been between 2 and 3% for 3 consecutive quarters, and it is higher than we'd like, but it's about half of what we inherited.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher.
What we inherited from those
has expired. Senator Patterson, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. As part of the inflation figures today, we learn that electricity costs are up annually 23.6%. What does the minister say to those Australians who will be paying higher power prices and struggling with higher interest rates because of the inflation your out-of-control spending is fuelling?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Gallagher.
Well, what I would say to households across Australia is that this government has your back. We are the ones that have put in place energy bill rebates as we go through some of the energy transition. And what I would also say is that the decade of those opposite wringing their hands and failing to land an energy policy, which they still can't do in opposition, has contributed to the situation we find ourselves in now. 24 of the nation's 28 ageing coal-fired power stations announced they were closing within the decade under the former government. We saw energy generation leave the grid. We have ensured that that is getting back on track with gigawatts of energy coming back in. Those opposite failed the Australian community when it came to planning for our energy needs. This government is responsible. We're the ones that are dealing with it, whilst you continue to kill yourselves over energy.
Senator Patterson, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Governor of the Reserve Bank has recently warned that government spending is growing very quickly, with substantial deficits projected into the foreseeable future. The government now has higher inflation, out-of-control spending, record debt and higher unemployment. When will you admit that your economic management has failed and change your reckless policies?
Mate, you couldn't script this kind of political theatre if you tried. Picture this: the Senate chamber buzzing like a beehive that's just been kicked. Cameras rolling, senators glaring, the air thick with tension, and right in the middle of it, Minister Katie Gallagher, clutching her notes, doing her best to sound confident while the entire Senate sits there in utter disbelief. You could almost hear the collective "what the hell was that?" ripple through the room. Before we dive into this Gallagher meltdown, where the whole Senate's in shock and Labor's spinning harder than a busted ceiling fan, smash that like button, subscribe for more Aussie political chaos, and grab the Not Far Right Just Right shirt, links in the description. The topic? Inflation, that pesky 3.2% jump that's got Aussies paying more for their weekly groceries, higher power bills, and mortgages that feel like they're hand-delivered by Satan himself. Senator Patterson stands up, crisp, ready to land a jab. He throws it straight down the line, no fluff, no warm-up. Minister Gallagher, does the government admit that spending growth running at 4 times the rate of the economy and debt set to reach $1.2 trillion is fueling inflation and hurting all Australians? Bang! The kind of question that slices through the chamber like a hot knife through Vegemite toast. Everyone leans forward, because this isn't just a number game. This is about the government's credibility. And Gallagher? Well, she starts with this half smile that says, "Okay, here we go." You can almost see her mentally flipping through her talking points. Then she starts with the classic Labor defense move. "Thank you, Senator Patterson. I'm glad to finally get a question on the economy. We haven't had one for a while." Ah yes, the classic deflection. That tiny jab that says, "You lot don't even care about the economy until it suits you." But then, instead of directly answering, she launches into what can only be described as a rambling greatest hits album of political excuses. The coalition wanted higher taxes, bigger deficits, and nuclear power stations. They apparently plan to raise electricity prices. She brings up inflation we inherited from those opposite. The golden phrase every government keeps handy like a spare roll of toilet paper. Now, don't get me wrong, she's not wrong that inflation was sitting at 6.1% when Labor came in. That's true. But watching her twist that into a victory lap while inflation ticks up again, that's like celebrating fixing a leaky roof while rain's still pouring through the ceiling. The senators opposite are trying to keep straight faces, but the smirks are slipping through. Patterson's probably thinking, "You're really gonna stand there and tell us it's all fine while prices are skyrocketing?" Gallagher keeps rolling though, talking about budget repair and working hand in hand with the Reserve Bank. It's the sort of bureaucratic lullaby that puts half the room to sleep and drives the other half mad. And then she drops the line, "Inflation has been between 2 and 3% for 3 consecutive quarters." Which, sure, sounds nice until you realize that underlying inflation, not what Aussies are actually feeling when they're staring at a $9 lettuce and $2.50 for a single avocado. Out there in the real world, it's not trimmed mean inflation, it's bloody expensive inflation. Patterson's not letting it slide. He gets up for his supplementary, the man's loaded for round 2. He zeroes in on power bills. Electricity costs are up 23.6% annually. What do you say to those Australians paying higher power prices and struggling with higher interest rates because of your out-of-control spending? You could almost hear the collective "good one" echo through the opposition benches. Gallagher blinks, grips the lectern, and starts again, this time with that patronizing calm that politicians adopt when they know they're cornered. "What I would say to households across Australia," she starts, "is that this government has your back. Mate." That line. It's like a bad punchline to a cruel joke. Has your back? Tell that to the family watching their energy bill double since last winter, or to the tradie whose mortgage payment just swallowed his entire week's pay. Then she starts on about energy bill rebates and the energy transition, as if the average Aussie struggling to keep the lights on cares about the long-term transition when their power bill just jumped 23%. She blames the coalition again, 10 years of hand-wringing and failing to land an energy policy. Fair cop, the coalition's record on energy wasn't exactly stellar. But this isn't about who stuffed it up first. It's about who's stuffing it up now. And then, out of nowhere, she starts listing coal-fired power stations closing down under the previous government, 24 of 28 in a decade. True, but the way she delivers it, it's like she's narrating an obituary for the energy sector. You can almost imagine the speech bubble above her head saying, "See? It's not our fault, it's theirs." By this point, you can feel the Senate getting restless. The murmurs are getting louder, eyes are rolling, and a few senators look like they're 2 sighs away from throwing a chair. The president has to bring it back to order. And you just know Sky News producers are in their control room losing it. This is political gold. Then Patterson goes in for the knockout. He quotes the Reserve Bank governor warning about government spending growing very quickly with substantial deficits projected into the foreseeable future. He points out, correctly, that the government's now got higher inflation, record debt, higher unemployment. And he ends it with a clean uppercut. "When will you admit your economic management has failed?" Silence. The room tightens. Cameras zoom in. And Gallagher, bless her, walks straight into it. She doesn't deny it. She doesn't even pause. She just blabbers. There's really no better word for it. She launches into this long, defensive, rambling tirade about the coalition's bigger deficits and failed energy policies. She actually says the words 2 Liberal deficits into 2 Labor surpluses, like it's some kind of magic trick that erases every other problem in the country. You can practically see the senators thinking, "Mate, you're the Treasurer's representative, not the magician's assistant." And when she starts listing areas of neglect, energy, the NDIS, aged care, Medicare, infrastructure, it becomes clear she's not answering the question. She's reading from a script. It's not a conversation. It's damage control in slow motion. But here's where it gets fascinating. Despite the chaos, you can tell Gallagher actually believes what she's saying. She's convinced that Labor's doing the responsible thing, repairing the budget, and being upfront and honest. It's like she's in this alternate Canberra reality where budget surpluses automatically mean the economy's humming, even if ordinary Aussies are flat out struggling to buy a full tank of petrol. And that's the disconnect that drives voters mad. Because while politicians squabble over who's got the better deficit record, the rest of the country's just trying to survive the price of milk. The senators know it too. The disbelief isn't just about Gallagher's words, it's about the whole performance. The blabbering, the blame shifting, the robotic talking points. It's the sense that no one in that chamber is actually listening to the people who put them there. And you could tell the opposition loved every second of it. They didn't even need to say much. Gallagher was doing their job for them. Every time she threw out another line about responsibility or repairing the budget, they just sat back, smirking like, "Keep talking, you're digging your own hole." When the president finally cut her off with "Minister, the time for answering has expired," it felt less like a procedural note and more like a mercy rule. Because that's what it was, a slow-motion car crash of a defense. You had a minister cornered by her own numbers, a Senate that had lost patience, and an audience watching a government that looked out of touch with its own spin. Now, to be fair, the economy's not an easy gig for any government right now. Global factors, supply chains, wars, cost of living pressures, it's a nightmare cocktail. But this wasn't about economics. This was about messaging. And Labor's message that day was a tangled mess of excuses and contradictions. They want to own the surplus narrative, but not the inflation that comes with it. They want to say, "We're investing in Australians," but not admit that the spending's pushing prices up. It's like they want to be seen as the grown-ups in the room while pretending they didn't leave the financial stove on full blast. The irony? Gallagher's not even the villain here. She's just the messenger, thrown into the Senate's lion pit to defend the government's every wobble. But when the script runs out and the questions get real, that's when you see the cracks. That's when the blabbering starts. And that's when the Senate, and the country watching, goes, "Hang on, do they even have a plan?" Because at the end of the day, no matter how many charts or trimmed mean numbers you throw around, Australians don't feel graphs, they feel bills. And when the government's line doesn't match what people see in their wallets, disbelief turns to frustration, fast. So, the scene fades out. The president's gavel drops, the ministers shuffle their papers, the opposition leans back with that smug post-match grin. Gallagher walks out of the chamber with that stiff, political composure, but you can tell she knows that performance didn't land. And the rest of us? We're left watching the reruns, shaking our heads at yet another Canberra circus. It's all there, the tension, the theatrics, the bluster. But behind it, the real story's dead simple. A government that keeps telling Australians it's got their back, while the numbers and the bills say otherwise. That's the thing about politics, mate. You can spin the stats, you can polish the talking points, but when the Senate itself sits there in disbelief, it tells you everything. Because no matter how loud the defense, the truth has this funny way of cutting through the blabber. And that's exactly what happened that day. Gallagher talked. The Senate stared. And Australia watched, wondering how long this lot can keep pretending everything's fine while the room's clearly on fire. So, smash that like button if you reckon Australia deserves better. Subscribe to keep the pollies honest, and grab the Not Far Right Just Right shirt, links in the description.